Sí.
Escoítase, non? Bueno, moi boas.
Good afternoon. We resume the second part of this afternoon's session. After having listened to the experience of a producer like David Binder, we now have a woman who goes hand in hand with a festival. She's a dynamic, entrepreneurial person. She is independent and expert in making dreams come true, because that's what a festival is all about, to make a dream come true. I see some people here that I know, and I know that you are in charge of organizing festivals. It's a way for Sheila Cremaschi is the person, and her festival is called Hey Festival. Some people read it I Festival, but that would be reading it in Spanish, but it's Hey Festival. Sheila is Argentinian, but she also has Italian connections. Are you an Italo-Argentinian? Yes, Italian-Argentinian. A graduate in history and an active teacher at the National University of Cuyo in Argentina. She holds a master's degree in cultural management and policy. She's an activist, a cultural activist. She started in performing arts, and wherever she starts something, she goes really deep. She had her own theatre in Buenos Aires. The festival, the Hey Festival, is very interesting in its origins. It's an example of how things can grow beyond what one could have imagined that they would. 26 years ago, in a very small town in Wales, Hay-on-Wye, a small town of 1,200 inhabitants and 4 million sheep. Well, they are also inhabitants, aren't they? And 41 bookshops, mostly of used books. It's a rather curious location. So this festival was born there around literature and the arts. Since the first edition in 2006, the idea was then taken to other parts of the world, and it also spread to the Spanish-speaking countries. It was hosted in Latin America and also in Spain. And in Spain, Sheila was responsible for starting it in the city of Segovia, where they host the Hey Festival. It is now hosted all over the world in different continents, more than 10 different countries. And it has to do with literature and the arts, with ideas, one could say. She's the Vice President of the Consultative Committee of the Hey Festival of Literature and the Arts, and also Director for the Spanish edition and the Hungarian edition in Budapest. You probably live on a plane. The Hey Festival is held in different parts of the world at different times of the year. If we were to afford a sabbatical, we could go from Hey Festival to Hey Festival throughout the year all over the world. She's also co-editor of a magazine that you probably know, Intramuros, and she has received many awards and international prizes. I would like to highlight some. She has the Johann Strauss Medal by the city of Vienna, and about a fortnight ago she was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II's given her the Order of the British Empire, which is a very honourable award, and it's nice to see that culture is so awarded. The Hey Festival's latest edition was held in September this year, and its motto is Imagine the World. So we're now going to give the floor to Sheila so she can imagine, or help us imagine, what a festival is and how imagination can become true. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Maria. for this introduction. Well, we can now leave because she said it all. What can I do to surpass this? Well, this is the first part of the Hay Festival that she has explained, so I'm going to wrap up. You can watch all the different venues. I need some help now. There's Segovia, Africa. This is one in Beirut. Cartagena in Colombia. This is the project in India. This is the one in Dhaka. This one in Budapest. So now how do I get my pictures on the slide, on the screen? I need some help here, please. Oh, there they are. Now they're all together. I'm going to speak about Segovia. This is the opening ceremony that we have every year. We start by taking 700 people traveling from the major station in Madrid. They go to Segovia. We invite journalists, ambassadors, and other potential sponsors. So every year there is a guest country on the train. This year it was the Netherlands. What we saw before was a dialogue. I mean, the people depart from the train station. We all get on the train. We arrive at the train station in Segovia, and then we catch a bus there. The bus takes us to the university that we saw before. At the university, there is a very old church there. So we have a dialogue there for over an hour, and it's called Free Voices. It's a dialogue about a topic that has to do with communication, freedom, and this year it was about journalists from The Guardian, together with a journalist from the Spanish newspaper El País. So they had a discussion on all the changes and what the future has in stake for the media. Then the Netherlands, being the guest country, well, we had a performance out in the open. I don't know if you can see this woman there. She's a sort of a movable puppet. She's wearing a dress that wears a ton with many flowers, and she sort of moves around as the band plays. I was surprised to see the amount of people that got together. I thought that we would assemble 500 people, but there's far more than that. 18,000 people, according to the police report. This is another performance. I'm going to stop for a second to say something. This festival has a lot to do with the celebration of the word and conversation. So this is what happens during the performances. And since it's done in the city of Segovia, do you know Segovia at all? Any of you? Raise your hands, please. It's a very small town, and it has wonderful places in the old city. It's full of old churches. So the Segovia festival, each festival is changed when it reaches the city. The city changes the idea that we have, that we bring of having this discussion. When it's in the UK, it's only discussions in tents. When we do it in Segovia, and we saw these wonderful locations, we started to change the original concept. So we started to give greater importance to all the visual arts in order to make use of all the available spaces in the old city. As you know, if you are managing culture or directing a festival, you have to reinvent yourself every year. You have to do the same, but do it in a different, a novel way. So this way we brought a balloon. And I was insisting on getting onto the balloon. We had a competition to people who would fly on the balloon. I didn't want to fly, but other people did. And so they would read poems, of Saint John of the Cross and of Saint Teresa of Avila. These are local saints from the Middle Ages, and they are local, so we bring on board local elements into the festival. And one way of bringing the local into the picture is by celebrating the characters who lived in Segovia, such as these two medieval saints and poets. It took us 2 hours to do the thing. This is on the Thursday, and I thought that technology might fail, so I had some other brochures from previous years. We have the 2012 and the 2013. The 2013 is not the good one because it's the one that had some typos. I had to print it again. But that was just the only problem, some typos. So on the Thursday we started with literature and France. There we have one of the meeting rooms. This took place in French. We have Fuenquino, who is in dialogue or in discussion with the Grazia magazine. This has to do with China. This year, besides having the discussions or the dialogues, the conversations, we also have visual arts. This that you see here is an exhibition that is spectacular. It's going to be open until the end of this month. And we were celebrating the 40th anniversary of relations between China and Spain. As I was telling Nacho when we had coffee a while ago, the Hay Festival is a non-for-profit organization. In other words, every year we are a private foundation, but we don't have money to work with. So the first thing that we have to do is, when we finish the edition of a festival, we are looking for funding, we're raising funds, we are looking for sponsorship, and if you look at the final part of the program, you have all the logos of the sponsors. So we have this cumbersome task of seeking sponsorships as well as inventing events and activities that may fit into what the sponsors would like to see. So we had an important sponsorship this year from the Chinese government, and they brought this exhibition. I don't know whether you can see here. It's a very interesting thing. Well, this is the ABC newspaper. I'll wrap up with China. It's an 800 meters squared exhibition about Chinese architecture and how the city of Beijing and the whole of China or Shanghai are now being transformed, and what structures are being built. 60% of the highest skyscrapers in the world today are in Shanghai or in Beijing, and they are made by Chinese architects together with Western architects, and that's the show that we saw before. We have Foster, Herzog, and some Chinese architects. The most important Chinese architect is the one whose name is Wan Shu. We'll see some of his works later. This event is streamed online. It's held with the ABC newspaper. We invited the 5 best-selling authors in Spain, and we had a dialogue with them about how to invent a bestseller. This is another workshop. These are the social programs in gardens. This is an English lady that we invited. She's the best-selling crime story writer. Here's a seminar with the Chinese. At the same time that we do the exhibition architecture, the architectural exhibition, we supplement this exhibition with conversations. This is one such. This is the number one. You must remember his face. He's the one who signs the budget for this kind of events outside of China. Do you want his telephone number too? This is Lu Wan, the wife of Wan Shu. She's also an architect. They have an architectural studio which is extraordinary. They go back to the classic materials, the building materials in Chinese architecture. So the architecture that they do now is very different to what is done in the West. It's not all about large, spectacular buildings. They go back to the origins. This is Eduardo Arroyo, that I suppose you are familiar with. This is another one of the venues. What we saw before, it's another part of the university. This is the chapel of the university. This is Lorenzo Silva. Every year we have 2 programs to foster reading. I have always thought that festivals have to instill something in the places where they are held. As hey, we have 10 venues in the world to 10 cities, and as she said, we would have to take a sabbatical year. That would be lovely if you can follow us and visit us in 10 different countries. There's always a hay festival at the end of every month. But we have to leave something to the place that we visit. So one thing that we thought would be helpful would be to foster reading. So we have fostered the creation of reading clubs. So every year we choose a fetish book. This year it was Lorenzo Silva, but we've also had other Spanish writers. So what do we do? 1 month before, we start by reading. We have a public reading of the book all the way up until the end of the month, because the festival in Segovia is in the last week of September. So we start by reading, and this is the last week. So everyone has already read the book. They have tired of reading the book. They've finished it, and so they come to the second discussion. This is done in Spanish, but we also choose books in English. Sometimes, since we have had other guest countries, for instance, when we had Germany, we also read in German. So we foster reading in general, reading in Spanish, and reading in whichever other language. We also do English and other languages that we invite in. Within the 3 exhibitions that we held this year, we have this by Ibarola. In itself, it was a performance, because as you can see, the size of his works. This may look small, but each one of these weighs 3 tons. So to bring them all the way from the north, somewhere in the north, I'm not sure where, in large trucks with huge cranes to unload them. 1 week before the festival, well, we had to mobilize hundreds of people. It was spectacular. So we set up a tent because they said it might rain. So we set up this, here what would you see? Well, it didn't rain. This lopsided picture is where we hold the discussion. This is one of the star events of the festival. The director of the Pritzker Awards, Martha Form, and the winner, Huan Shu, who was the winner. There's Martha Thorne and Huan Shu. Huan Shu is considered by the Time magazine. You know, Time magazine wants to sell copies, so they publish all sorts of things. This year, they had the 100 most influential people of the world, and number 49 is Huan Shu. Number 1 or number 2 was Barack Obama. This is another way of bringing the local to the international. This that you see here is the non-public area of where John of the Cross is buried. This is the cave, and here we're reading. They're reading poems of John of the Cross, Saint John of the Cross. There's a part that is public, and that's where he is buried. All the people can go and visit. but we have convinced the private part. This is all a bit disorganized, but what we do is that we take emblematic areas of Segovia and do things there that fit into the venue, and we're followed by the people, which is the most important thing. If you do something and you're not followed by the people, then it's all pointless. This is the garden of an Uruguayan citizen called Lorenzo Silva, who died 3 or 4 years ago, I can't remember. And he was the one who did some work at Versailles and also the Botanical Gardens in Madrid. So this is the place where we read poems by Gil de Biedma, another Spanish poet who lived in Segovia, and we mixed this with poems from India. It's like a babble, so everyone comes and reads a poem in whichever language. In this case, we had 2 languages only, Spanish and English. This is Ibarola. We see his sculptures. There you can see more or less the size of his sculptures next to the people standing them. Here we have the correspondent from The Guardian. Together with the Spanish cultural authorities, we hosted a cycle, and he is the director. Remember his face if you are a cultural manager. He is the cultural director of the Spanish Cultural Action. And George Edwards, who's a Chilean writer. And this is the cycle. This is the same. The previous one was a cycle about the writer Bolaño, and we hosted 5 different meetings on Bolaño. We'll see each one of them. I also am the director in Hungary, because the British have divided the territories in that way. In the past I used to have Europe and the Americas, but then they realized that it would be best for me to do continental Europe. So this event, well, we have the Daily Telegraph in the middle. This is Laszlo Van, who's a genius. I recommend you get in touch with him too. And this is the curator of the Prado Museum. And the topic was whether the crisis... Well, what do you do with the crisis and large museums? It was wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And they said that we have to take a great leap forward because there is no budget for museums. And the venue, in case you hadn't noticed, it's the Church of St. Nicholas, another Romanesque church. There we have more of the same. This is in a theatre called Juan Bravo, and it's a conversation between Viñas and Juan Cruz. In Segovia, all that has to do with the discussions is also supported on books. So after the events, the authors sign their books. This is the Juan Bravo Theatre. Here we have Rosa Montero, Ana Gabin, Nativ El Preciado, talking about their most recent books. This is the Palace of Quintana, another event in the Bolaño cycle. This is the Segovia room. And there is an event there of an Israeli writer who is also a soldier. Very interesting. There are 18 venues that we Segovia. The whole of the old city is integrated, and people run from one place to another. And that's how they keep fit. There we have Ian Gibson. This is an exhibition by a French Moroccan called Elbats. It's another exhibition, and that's all. This discussion, when we organize each year, we try to not only have presentations of books. It's very nice for the authors to present their books, but also to see what people are concerned about. It's not easy to guess what concerns people have. This is the greatest expert in Europe on pensions. So we invited him to discuss with Cesar Molinas, who has written an extraordinary book called What to Do with Spain. It has to do with all the current concerns that we have in Spain. That's the Bookmakers Association. This is an English event with a Scottish woman and a Welsh woman and an English singer in the middle who also writes songs. And there is also a journalism event with other people. These are the queues. We love to take pictures of people queuing. Because if you want to go and sell a project, and you say, look, it's the best, it's the most wonderful festival, so full of people, and no one believes you, because everyone says the same. So this is the only way. You bring them the hard facts, these pictures. Look, all these people queuing to see our event. See? It took me several years to realize I would have the picture of a famous author, writer, whatever, posing, whatever, and the sponsors looked at me and said, yes, that's all very nice. Until I realized that I also needed pictures not only of the important person, but also of the audiences. It took me 3 years to realize it, but now you know it. Make the photographer also take a picture of the audience. Here we have another star event. Mario Vargas Llosa talking to GGG Armas Marcelo. I had a problem with Vargas Llosa because we had overbooking. We're human. So in order to solve this, I had to set up a false press office, just in case it happens to you. I didn't know what to do with 100 and something tickets that we had sold in excess, because the people who buy tickets will kill you if they get there and they bring a knife to stab you if you don't give them a seat. So I had a make-believe press room with the TV, and those who went early had a seat in the main room, and those who came later had a seat in the other room. And this is also another writer. That is another star moment of the festival. It's a German writer, Timus Vermeer, who wrote a book on Hitler. What would happen if Hitler were to resurrect? It was the one that has most press releases in favor and against. And I don't know what this is. This is Tomatito and Pardo. Instead of playing, performing, they came to talk. This is another cue. More people. See, now that we always focus on the people. Here we continue. This is another controversial issue. This is a member from the Flemish delegation, and this is a man from Catalonia. Guess what they're talking about? The problem of how decision-making is all about in places like Flanders or Catalonia. Flanders is similar to Catalonia. They have a different language than the rest of Belgium, and they are the richest citizens of Belgium. What you see here is a lowly bookshop, and this is an Indian writer, so we continue to foster readership. Here we have the Cervantes Award, Mr. Bonal and Mr. Montero reading, Miguel Ángel Aguilar. Another session on Bolaño, there were several of them. See that there's also an audience. This is Marta del Riego, and this is a young writer from Germany called Daniela Kreen, and there are the two of them.
This is another session in the garden we saw before. And here we see another session on Bolaño, and we had several writers, and the Bolaño cycle was set up like this. They chose a text by Bolaño, and they had to say why they had chosen that text. It was quite simple. Here, this is quite sad, because she is a Colombian writer who wrote a book after her son committed suicide. So it was quite sad. She's discussing this with García Montero. This event also has something to do with a concern we find in our society, which is the so-called Marca España, how this was seen and how value was attached to this marketing concept. And we were not that creative. We thought the Spanish was the most important landmark or brand name, brand item we could use for Spain. And we had Víctor García de la Concha from the Instituto Cervantes, somebody from the Spanish Royal Academy. Here we see some other shots and the audience. What you see here in this picture, this was crazy. I called Ian Gibson and I said, Ian, what are we going to do? What happens with your new book? And he said, Sheila, I haven't finished my new book. And I said, what are we going to do? Are we going to speak about Buñuel? You have been hired. We have the money from the Irish and you don't have your new book. So we spoke with the publishers, and there's things you have to think of. And the publisher said, no, we cannot present or launch Buñuel's book if it's not ready. To cut a long story short, you know, Ian Gibson is Machado's biographer. Machado lived in Segovia, and we said, why don't we have a tour around Segovia speaking about Machado? And you see this. We had a maximum number of 20 people. It was the most expensive ticket. The whole festival was €3, and this was €5. Those 20 tickets, and you can see that the price is not so important. If something's interesting, were sold in 2 hours, and all the others came without a ticket. You just see how many people came without having a ticket, and you see poor Ian Gibson thinking, what am I going to do with all these people? Told me I was to speak for 20 people. What do I do here? Just look at the crowd. This is Machado's house. And this is quite interesting too. This guy you see here is the heir of the Habsburg Austro-Hungarian Empire dynasty, and he's working with an organization called Blue Shield. These are shields that are pasted or posted on buildings to protect them. This is like the Red Cross, and if there's a war, and if people are going to bomb that place, if they see a blue shield, that's an international covenant to avoid this. Here we have a conversation between Iwasaki, another conversation in Europe. Here, just relaxing. Here we have a conversation on crime fiction in Britain. This year we focused on murders, so we had the different murder as the main topic. We had Silva, Abegondo, Russell Crowe, McDermott. This is another interesting example. We have a theatre director called Lucas Berfus, and he's speaking to to a representative of the Frankfurter Allgemeine. This is Chinese, a Chinese poet, again in San Nicolas, and they are reading in Chinese, and another person read the same poem in Spanish, the Spanish translation. This is the controversial book I mentioned before, because we saw the picture before. This is Patricia Prawn. It's a young writer. Here you have our volunteers. You know that we have the festival, we organize a festival with volunteers. We're a non-profit trust, so most of the people who work with us are volunteers, and they're all from Segovia, and every year we have more and more people who want to volunteer for our trust, because it is for them some kind of pride that they take care of those who come to the festival. Here we see the closing session, Muñoz Molina, Josep Pons, and Muñoz Mantilla, who are discussing. Just look at the audience. They're discussing Verdi and Wagner, and then we could listen to their music. And this is the end. This is one of the public readings. Just take a look at the number of people who gathered to listen to these readings. And that's it. That's the end of this part. What do I have to do? Nothing? Okay. I can stop. How am I doing with time? So I have some more time? Okay. This is something the festival is over, but we have to prepare the report now. So this is an example. We have the balloon. We thought that this was a very interesting image. Oh, by the way, maybe you can help me now, so that we have two voices. Can you read this? Can you read the first one? So this is some kind of duet. When I got here today, in order to be the director of a festival, we have to be somehow special. So when I got here, we didn't know each other, but she did not just hand over tasks, but we shared. She started telling me how important I was, and I was like, me? And then she said, oh, should we share when we speak, etc.? This is the idea of sharing. I think this has much to do with directing festivals, with giving people the chance and the space to be. Okay, let me read this. I have a professional here, I have to use her. So this is from La Vanguardia. These are some news clips. A balloon flies over the aqueduct, while inside it poems are read by Santa Teresa of Avila, and some of them may fall on a Nobel Prize winner head. There are performances, sculptures of Ibarrola that have come on truck. Some of the pieces weigh 3 tons. Writing workshops, debates on the future of pensions, people reading at the orchard of a convent, films, and on the streets, amongst the volunteers, we have Marcos Vargas Llosa, Caballero Bonal, Lorenzo Silva, Ibarrola himself. Where are we? You've guessed, we are at the Hay Festival in Segovia. This is what La Vanguardia says. El País says, this is an example for everyone of an activity that has high quality, that brings people, crowds, and sponsors with it, and we have to congratulate ourselves for its 8th edition, and more should come. La Razón says, we have Mark McDermott, Crib Barcel, crime fiction writers, along with Lorenzo Silva, Dolores Redondo. And this is even more important in the Spanish language. We have Cervantes award winners, Caballero Bonal, and the Príncipe de Asturias Prize 2013, Antonio Muñoz Molina. La Vanguardia says 140 guests from many countries make Segovia the capital of the letters. The Hay Festival is far more than a literary festival. ABC, this is an event that brings together discussions, panels, workshops, exhibitions, concerts, and projections from a participatory perspective in order to be present in the areas of the letters, of cinema, music, and the arts in general. And Agencia F says, welcome this platform, neutral and democratic platform during the autumn. The Hay Festival in Segovia first landed there 8 years ago and is fighting the storm. And El Adelantado de Segovia says, apart from the social and literary event, we have so many intellectuals present in the 8th edition of the Hay Festival. Papel en Blanco says, one of the most important events, literary events in our country, it's an event to celebrate culture and literature. Abeza says, not everyone we can discuss something with a Nobel Prize, 2 Cervantes Prizes. Yesterday was the day, and Segovia was filled with talent. María Vargas Llosa, Caballero Bonal, and Jorge Edwards, they all brought the rhythm and intensity to the Hay Festival that will not be forgotten, and who paid homage to Roberto Vidal Bolaño 10 years after his death. As said, here you have the figures, and now the questions. We have 143 artists. You see the events, 20,000 plus people who attended the 69 events, plus 8,000. The opening ceremony with that woman wearing the flower dress. And we had 23 countries. And we had cinema as well, films, and 4 visual art exhibitions, 14 readings, 2 concerts, and the balloon. And that's it. So now is your time to ask.
Ella es la profesional.
I can't see anything. I think we have a question here.
Hola. Tengo curiosidad.
Hi there. I'm curious to know, we look at the figures, we look at the number of events, and you said that every year you have to reinvent yourself, but doing the same. So I'm curious to know what you're planning for your next festival. No idea. Well, the first thing you have to do, unfortunately, is to go out there and get the money. That's the truth, because money is going to give you the chance to reach your dream, to get to your dream. For example, I know that there are some things I do. It has to be an international festival, so we need to have a British part of participants and from other countries, but I do not have any. Did you wanted some names or an idea? We're sorry, but if speakers do not use the microphone, we cannot interpret. No, that's over. Maybe you have some ideas. Maybe you can share some ideas with me. We really have to think. Festivals have to reinvent themselves, otherwise they die. We have to bring them back to life every time. And do the other headquarters have the same structure as the one in Segovia, the other venues? Do they have the same philosophy? Yeah, festivals follow the basic idea. Okay, the light's no longer on. Why am I keeping my hand like this? Okay. I'm not used to being on camera. So we take a basic structure, which are these conversations or dialogues of 1 hour, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, and 10 minutes of questions from the audience. This is the original scheme, the original framework. This is what was done in Wales 27 years ago, and that was just what it was. Conversations, debates with people, usually between 2 people. And this structure was then taken elsewhere. But the reality of each place, of each site, modified this. For example, the visual arts is done in Spain. Basically, due to the landscape we have. We have some wonderful landscape, with wonderful scene, the stage, and we need to use it. For example, the balloon, the churches, etc. In other places, for example, in Africa, they also have them in the middle of nowhere, and they use tents. And there they focus much on conversations as well, on these dialogues. So it depends. Each festival, each site adapts to the space where it takes place. For example, the one in Cartagena, as this is a country very much embedded in music, concerts become as important as the rest of the festival. So we have huge squares, and then there are some parts where you have to pay a ticket, and then huge areas where it's for free. But the stages you see there are huge. They're like Hollywood. So in Cartagena, music is really a plus point. I have several questions, but I'll ask them afterwards. Anybody else? Hi, I had 2 questions. The first one, when you didn't have pictures of the audience and evidence of your success of previous festivals, what was your most important key to get sponsors for your festival? And the second question, looking at the people who are in the festival, they are international guests, and I'd like to ask whether you have a specific department for global sponsorships. Do you manage this from Spain, or how do you do that? These are my 2 questions. Okay, let me explain the structure first. As I said, this is a non-profit organization, and it has people. So nobody can manage this. And then they meet just once a year. I am part of this board. They meet once a year, and of course they do not reach any conclusions, because 100 people cannot get together and be of the same opinion. And then we have an executive committee with just 5 people, and the chair, I love her, is Churchill's granddaughter, and she's a film producer. She produced that one Spielberg's movie War Horse, I think it's called. So this committee, the executive committee, includes just 5 people. And we do not have anything global. During the first years, I was the person in charge. I had to go and get money for all the festivals. This was a time at the beginning when Wales was involved. When we had Wales, Spain, and Cartagena, it was just 3 venues, and I had to look for money, and I had to offer the sponsors that they sponsor the 3 venues. That was some kind of comprehensive sponsorship pack. Apart from that, the festival in the UK, this is something that could be an advantage for the UK and a disadvantage for Spain. They've always had media partners, strong media partners. For example, first we had the Times, but they get tired after a while. So first we had the Times, then we had the Guardian, and now we have the Telegraph. That is press, and then BBC, Sky News. So you see this commercial channel, and we're back to the BBC now. So in the UK, the money used to come because we guaranteed to some extent, and you know that this is something that we can only guarantee to some extent, that the sponsor could appear in the newspaper or in the TV channels. So we had all sorts of tricks. For example, the tents where we had the events. In Wales, they hold 200,000 people. They're huge tents where we have 200,000 people. So you just see the facade and it doesn't look that big, but then you go inside and you can walk, walk and walk. So we have, for example, the Barclays Bank tent. And we have in Sky News all the time, they're just speaking about Barclays Bank tent. Go and see Gordon Brown, who is at the Barclays. So in the UK, they have this, and for several years I was in charge of this. Then we had Nairobi. I supported them to some extent, and in the past 3 years, due to the dissemination of this festival, we've had a different situation. There are people coming from other countries coming to Wales and offering money to do the festival in their country. This happened with Mexico. Mexico is booming. You have to write this down. And they came and offered to have this festival in Mexico. So we opened up to 10 countries. And we had to reorganize our roles. I'm still looking for funding for Europe. This is the most difficult place right now where we have less money. Of course, that's where we know that this is a situation. For culture, there's no money anymore. This is where we've had more cuts for culture. Another question? Good evening. I'd like to know how you make decisions on the venues, whether it is like Mexico offering itself or whether some of the members of the committee mentions that we should have the festival here or there. I'll share 2 anecdotes with you, but I'll give you a serious answer first and then 2 anecdotes. As I was telling you, the executive committee, that's where things really happen. Because as I said, just imagine what work we can do with 100 people. So that's where we make decisions and then they're taken to this board of trustees. At the beginning, and I discussed this with María outside, Wales had reached a ceiling. 10 days to 100,000 people, that's the ceiling. What can you do? 15 days, 20 days, 30 days? It's impossible. You cannot maintain this very high impact if you continue opening or expanding in terms of the number of days. So some people who have unfortunately passed away had much to do with the development. We had Carlos Fuentes, the Latin American writers, Tomás Eloy Martínez from Argentina, and Gabriel García Márquez. So these 3 writers said, and they convinced Peter Florence, our leader, that the only possible expansion was through the language. So they said Spanish is the 2nd most important language in the world. So the first expansion was due to the fact that a group of important writers said that the Spanish language had to be part of this. So as you can imagine, I submitted the Argentina as a candidate. We lost 3 times because García Márquez in the meeting said, either you do it in Cartagena or we don't do it. So here we have a way of seeing how a venue was chosen. After they chose Cartagena, it was either Cartagena or Cartagena. It's a wonderful city, but that's the way it was chosen. And they said, why should we not come to the motherland? So as I had submitted Argentina and I had lost, I was really sorry about the team. And I said, they were sorry about me. And they said, okay, go in Spain. So I said, okay, we already have the English language. We should not go to a place where we had another country. So I left Catalonia because there's another language there. Galicia, because they had another language that had to be included. So I said, let's go to Castile. Which one is the old one? And I think this is I got it wrong, but anyway, the original Castile was further south. Anyway, such things happen. And I got there for 3 cities, Avila. It was so cold. The day I took people to see Avila, I think Avila lost due to the cold. They were all frozen. And then we came to Segovia, it looked perfect. And then somebody said, Sheila, I'm going to tell you, and I can say this because it was published in the Telegraph a month ago, otherwise I couldn't say this. The director said, do you know that I had a great romance in Segovia? That was also in the Telegraph, that's why I'm telling you this. At the British Council in Madrid, there was a very beautiful girl. And our boss used to be an actor, a professional one. Now he may be an actor, but he's not professional. He went to read poems in Segovia. They fell in love, and he didn't go back to the UK for a month. So when I said Segovia, his eyes started shining. He said, Segovia, that's it. So 2 anecdotes. Budapest. As you can see, chance, life is a matter of chance. Budapest, this is all true, what I'm telling you. How did it start? We were in Cartagena, and we didn't have much money. We had gone beyond the limit because we had started with this Hollywood-style stage. The sponsor was not there anymore, and everybody was wondering, what do we do? And I said, why don't we do another festival so that we can go somewhere else and find more money so that we can repay what we had, because either we get the money back or we can't move forward. And as you saw, we had a theater in Austria. I had worked very much in Austria. They said, no, we cannot go to Austria. And I said, okay, Budapest. This was supposed to be a very small festival. For me, that was a one-day festival. And I was always referring to this. So when you say one day in English, it may also mean never. Do you want to go out with me? And somebody says one day, then there's no hope. That may be never. So I told my boss, okay, so what about Budapest? And he said, one day. So I thought, okay, well, one day festival. So I went to Budapest, and that's where we are. We have been there for 3 years. So that's how it goes. I'm not sure whether I've answered your question. Yes, have I? I'd like to know what people go to, the queues you show, to sponsors as well. Do people go to performances? Do they go to the expensive events, to the well-known writers, or do you introduce new writers? How do you find the balance? How do you strike the balance? We always try to introduce new people due to several reasons. We have to think first about the future. So the writer you helped with their first book will never forget you. I realize, because now that I've been more than 10 years working with this, I found guys whom I invited 10 years ago who were completely unknown, and they adore you. This doesn't ever happen otherwise. So you have to create, like football clubs, you know, they have their team of youngsters. We have to do the same. But the thing is that you lose money because nobody buys a bloody ticket. They don't know who you're talking about. You have to convince journalists that they are the revelation of the century. And journalists said, yeah, but how do I sell this to to my editor who hasn't heard this name ever. So you just invite your relatives or people on the street so that they have some audiences. And as I said before, all guests can forgive anything, that a taxi is late, that it is raining, that the food is good or not, but nobody's going to forgive if they come to an empty auditorium. If somebody comes to speak and they see there's nobody, they will dislike everything about it. So we need to have your parents, your friends, your relatives, people whom you can call so that they attend some of these events. Don't laugh. You cannot imagine the things that I've had to do to get here. Even the firemen, the municipal police, I have to convince to attend some of the events. That's true. Because you cannot just rely on that people are going to come what may. No, I come from the theater world, so we always have to rehearse. Nothing is left to fate. For example, for Bolaño's opening, we had Acción Cultura Española and a strong sponsor, and I was with Jorge Edwards, and half of those were people who this is the golden rule. I was surprised by the prices, €3, €5. In Europe, in the UK, this is far more expensive. Al Gore, for example, €50. The prices are really high, from €10 to whatever it takes. And people pay for it. In the UK, 50% of the money. This is a festival. In Wales, you will see those tomorrow, but mine is very small. That is €7 million, and half of this money comes through tickets, but that is the UK. But culture should not be for free. Sometimes we speak about this, paying something at least. Well, this is my personal belief, and I've struggled with this, with everyone because of this. Not in my festivals where we have, for example, I can discuss things with you, but sometimes you see a row that is completely free. If the festivals are free, you see people leaving. And they say, oh, this is so boring, let's go and have a beer. And you hear them while they leave. So the whole row gets up and they leave. It's not just this person who goes to have a beer. They take half of the people. And this happens. So we cannot just leave culture for free. It has to be a ritual. €3. You have to go and get your ticket. You have to queue. You should have problems with the website. Our website is always down. It's almost impossible to buy tickets there. You should try today. If you buy a ticket on our website in Wales, I swear that I get you a VIP golden pass for the Hay Festival in Segovia. I tell our colleagues in Wales, people don't speak English, so we had a parallel website in Spanish. Then I said, in Spain we are simpler when we buy. We cannot say what our dad's name is. You know, British websites want to sell something in the future, so they ask you, how old are you, what do you like, etc. So you have to fill in forms, and while you're in the middle, the connection is down and you cannot come to the purchase. So we have some volunteers who have just a phone to help those who want to buy a ticket. So people call and they think that they're calling Wales, and these are just our volunteers who speak in Spanish at the telephone in Madrid, and they fill in everything, and then they themselves go into the website and they buy the ticket for you. We have to be very careful about the audiences and sponsors. That's what we have to look after.
Sí. Sí. Ya habéis hablado un poco.
You have spoken about what I want to ask, but nevertheless I want to insist once again. You say that you work with potential participants. I think that we all here understand that reading is essential for the future of society. What type of endeavor do you use to promote your festival? Bearing in mind future generations. Bearing in mind that the younger people are now using mobile devices and they send text messages, they don't spell correctly, and they're the citizens of the future. There are poor festivals and rich festivals, or wealthy ones. Mine is poor. And all we do is bring together bodies that read. We do a lot of public reading. And we give free tickets for students. Up to 30% of the tickets are given free to students. And they don't attend if they're not interested. You can give them anything for free, but if they're not interested, they won't come. And one of the greatest disappointments I've ever had is that every year, we give away 30 or 40% of or whatever to students or youths, unemployed, to make sure they come. And we had a concert with the Red Russian, or the Russian girls, Russian Red. The ticket was expensive. It was 15 compared to the €3, and it was sold in half a day. All the youths in the world, they just wanted to see Russian Red. Anything else that we offered, they were not interested in. There's no comments on this one. So from a poor festival, we do what we can. We give away tickets, we do reading, we invite youths who we think may be interested. Then we see that they're not, but at least we try. And in Wales, they do have a wealthy festival, and they have a special program for kids. So they start with the toddlers. They have writers for children, and also another program with writers for teenagers. And these events are full, and they've been doing it for many years now. And when you go there and you see 200,000 people, it's sheer madness. You must go and see it. The event for youths and for children is separate, and it's also full. There's a lot of marketing, also working with publishers, children's book publishers. And as everyone knows, what teenagers used to be as targets for marketing, now it's the children. So it's full of companies that wish to sponsor you to sell their books. I think there are 2 more questions left before we wrap up and leave. I'll go back to the finances, if you allow me. So first we eat, and then we have the philosophy, she said in Italian, or something of the sort. You spoke about the 7 million that is the budget for Wales. And so what's the annual budget for Segovia? I was trying to figure out how much money you may make from tickets. So then, depending on how many tickets you give away for free, but can you give us an outline of the overall budget for the festival, and how much do you, how many revenues are from ticket sales, how much from sponsoring, how much from public administration? I think we can reach a gentleman's agreement. I spent half of my life in all of this. The companies will sponsor the event, but you have to sign a confidentiality agreement whereby you will not reveal the amount that each one of the sponsors has given you. And don't you ever think of publishing any amounts. But I'm going to give you a global figure without saying who gave us how much. In Spain and Budapest, the tickets are relatively inexpensive. It's €3 here and 5 or 7 in Budapest. You've done your math and you cannot make ends meet. So most of the money, well, a part of it is public funding that is made up of the monies given by the city of Segovia. €60,000. I can say this because it's a public figure. Then we have the regional government. They pay for events, so it's not very clear how much money is given by the regional government. Then the provincial council, they also provide us with theatres, they also send us staff, but they don't give us any cash. And then there is the private funding. That's where most of the money comes for the Segovia festival. I've just finished the budget, and I have 2 types of agreements. Well, I can organize 100 different types of agreements, but more or less in a nutshell. In one case, I'm given the money, so I write out an invoice and they send the money to Wales. When I started working with the Hay Festival some 10 years ago, I did not want to be involved in monies, and they asked me why. Because the only way to be able to program in peace in a foundation with 100 events is not to mess up with the money. So the money goes from the sponsors and public institutions to Wales. I, of course, authorize the payment, but the money is sent to Wales, and this makes my life much easier. So I go and visit the private sponsors, and I do what is best for them. So, for instance, I'm thinking of a specific case. I go and visit one and I say, I need you to help me. And so they all start with the same story. We don't have money, we have to sack people, we can't do this, and it can't be too large, it can't be too small, this, that, whatever. And I say, let's boil down to how can you help me? So they say, the Brazilians, for instance, well, I could pay for the transportation of the works by Ibarola, those 3-ton sculptures. We can pay for the video, but then we do it. And I say, perfect, but don't do it in Portuguese. So we more or less make do according to the individual sponsors. Some people can't do this because they just insist on cash. But I think it's not the way. I think we have to suggest other lines of potential help. There were the golden days that also happened in Spain when the companies did have money for culture. So you could go up to them and say, let's do the train thing. It's when we opened the Hay a week before. This event costs €100,000 to organize, and there is no one to sponsor this. So it's 25,000 for the train tickets. But there are things that I do that are paid directly, and other things that they prefer for me to write out an invoice and then they give the money to me. So if you add it all up, I've come close to 500,000 this year. And as you will see with the tickets, well, I think ticket sales have not made us perhaps some 30,000, 20,000 euros. So the ticket sales don't give us much. But we do build an audience that has to fight for the ticket, has to queue for it, has to buy the ticket. And so there is this mystic, respectful attitude, which is what it's all about. Another question up there? It's the last question, isn't it? Not without a microphone, please. So if you do math, less than 1/4 of it is public funding. I forgot to say something. I'm sorry. Then there's the Ministry of Culture that also gives public funding, the Spanish National Library, and the other public institutions. So roughly speaking, about 100,000, 120,000, 130,000. That's public money. And private funding? You know how much money was spent on plane tickets, airline tickets? More than 100,000 euros, because they had 20 people flying all over from China. I don't know how many of them. Maybe, but then we had the architects, the curators. Then the wives come with the men. That's all very nice. Then we have the big stars, and then we have the interpreters, because they all bring interpreters. That's also very nice. Not interpreters for the event, but just to accompany the delegates. Of course, Class 8 Chinese all speak English. Imagine an event where ticket sales are so important. What about the publishers? The publishers can be an interesting... I don't understand the question. Could you repeat it? The question is, if ticket sales are so important, I imagine that the large editorial groups are interesting sponsors. So I'd like to know whether they may more or less decide on which authors are going to be present at the conversations, or which books are going to be discussed. How do you go about this? This is like choosing the venues. As the publisher companies know that we exist, will they send us the lists of recent releases for the year? Well, in this case it will be for 2014. I think it's the year that is devoted to a Spanish writer. So I'm given all these books about the relevant writer, and the publishers send you a list of all their new releases. So you take the list. It all depends on who leads the festival. What I do in general, other directors don't. Each director has his or her own way. So I get together with a publisher and ask for their advice. So I say to them, what do you think is most interesting? Some may be obvious, but others I need advice for. And don't forget that book sales have also plummeted in last year or the year before that, sorry for the data being so ancient, I invited Eduardo Mendoza, whom I think is extraordinary, and he was the bestseller of the week. I've read it in all the newspapers. And I had a friend in the publisher, and I said, you have the record? Yes, we have the record. So how many books are sold per week? The crisis is so heavy that we're only selling 700 books a week. And in the past, but book sales have plummeted so much that a bestseller today is a book that sells. Well, of course, some books still sell a lot. So your relationship to the publishers is different because we're all poor now. And you cannot press them for them to pay because they don't have money either. So we have to make do. Authors love the publishers to go with them. So this is a relationship that we have to take much care of. Last question. I hope it's true. You said before that in order to convince the sponsors that you also offer them media coverage. Could you expand a little on how you convince them? If you have so good partners in the media, what are the keys to convince the BBC or other important media companies? Because it's not easy to get the journalists to become interested in this type of events. Every year we have to make up a different story. We know that Spain as a brand is so important. We have to do something together. We have to have lots of tricks. You have to bring will find that fits them. Then of course you have the owner's wife trick. If someone meets the wife of the owner of something in a cocktail, and then that's always going to be a success. But if we don't know the owner's wife, you cannot have a square mind. If you say, this is the best festival in the world, he says, yes, I know the story, everyone's is the best festival. But you have to prove that people will attend. Then you'll also have to have printed all the reviews in the media and have some interesting package that they may not open, but it has to be big enough. You may be laughing, but I swear for the love of God that it's true. I reach them with my dossier and say, look, this is all the media coverage we've had, all the reviews, and this, that, and the other. There are agencies now that are in charge of publishing the highlights, and some of them tell you what the cost is. So if you add up, with a lot of generosity, you always make millions in advertising. This works well. Another thing, something that is going to hit the company for whatever reason. I'll tell you a failure story instead of a success to know what not to do. When I did the pension thing, I had a meeting scheduled with a pension fund, because the issue of pensions is a problem. We live longer and less people are in a job, and we know the story. So there are some companies that are looking at ways to do business with this, because everything's business. So I had 2 interviews scheduled with 2 pension funds in order to tell them that I was creating an event with an expert and in one case the CEO went sick, so I was rescheduled for the following month, but then he was traveling, so that was the end of the story, because I never made it. Of course, you have to be careful as to whom we address. And in Spain, well, in the UK you have the cool letter. It's not cool. It's cold, not cool. It's cold letter. We apologize for the speaker's pronunciation. The cold letter, the cold call, does not work in Spain. If you send 700 letters to 700 sponsors, it's worthless. But at the same time, I could say that since I have lots of volunteers working for me, and I don't want to disincentive the young people, I take all these volunteers on board, and I've had them send letter after letter, and out of 1,000 they get 3 replies. So sometimes there is a miracle. However, what does work is that someone may connect you with the company for some reason. I remember the last sponsor I managed for Segovia. Well, I had this idea, and they said, "Do you know that the wife of the owner of this company is a fan of architecture? Didn't you know? But it's her passion." No, I didn't. So she said, "Why don't you invite her?" Because every year I host an architecture event that I think is the best in Spain, but I am not the one to say it, and that is to bring the director of bring together the organizers of an award, and I went to visit the husband of the lady who liked architecture, and I said to her all the time, "And I'm going to host an event on architecture," and then I said something else, and I said, "Oh, and there's going to be architecture." And at the end of the day, the guy went back home with the architecture thing in his mind. You may laugh, but this is that I'm saying is true. Well, it's all very nice, but it's time to wrap up. I think it's been a wonderful evening. I think we've all learned a lot, especially because you've been very honest. You've spoken on a one-to-one basis, telling us all these secrets and realities behind the scenes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your words. I hope you have enjoyed the session, and I have been delighted with this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.